Game of Thrones. It was the best of shows, it was the worst of shows. Many people have dissected, in detail, the failings of the final seasons of Thrones. If you're in need of a comprehensive takedown, you should watch Lindsay Ellis's videos or maybe those of Supercuts Delight. It is not controversial to dunk on this show. But here's the thing. Since Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 6 was released in May of 2019, capping off the show's downward spiral into ruin, there's always been this rogue part of my brain desperately trying to perform the mental gymnastics necessary to make the ending not even good, but just palatable, not so bad that it retroactively ruins the entire rest of the show. And recently, I experienced an epiphany, a moment of clarity, if you will. I think that with one simple change, you can actually fix the ending of the show. Now, I'm going to say in advance, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me about this. We can all pretty much agree that the ending of the show sucks, but we don't all agree on the specifics. Some people think that the White Walkers should have killed everyone, or that Daenerys shouldn't have gone full heiress, or whatever. But ultimately, the show was only ever going to have one ending, so not everyone was going to get what they wanted. Also, this fix only applies to the very ending of the show, so there are many flaws in the final seasons that go unredressed, but I'll come back to that. Here's the thing. There is actually one scene in Season 8, Episode 6, The Iron Throne, that I've always loved, and that might even be one of my favorites in the whole show. Divorced from the rest of Season 8, I think it works perfectly. So much so that when I was watching it for the first time, I genuinely remember feeling like I'd slipped into a parallel dimension where the show had actually stayed good for all 8 seasons. Here it is. Dany enters the throne room in King's Landing, and it's just completely blown to hell, mirroring her vision in the House of the Undying in Season 2. Snow or ash is raining down, and as Dany approaches the throne, the main theme plays, only it's different. Sad, forlorn, empty. I think that this scene, by itself, is the perfect ending to a grimdark fantasy story. The hero that you were rooting for from the start has finally gotten what they wanted, but at a cost that is so unimaginably great that it has rendered the entire victory utterly hollow, devoid of all meaning. Daenerys won the Game of Thrones, and in the process, she became everything she wanted to destroy and everything others feared she would be. Now, hear me out, because this is what I'm proposing. Dany walks up to the Iron Throne. Gingerly, she reaches out and touches it for the first time, reclaiming her family's birthright. Then, as she stands admiring the throne, Jon Snow emerges from the darkness of the entryway behind her. She turns, and we cut to black. That's it. That's the end of Game of Thrones. It is left completely ambiguous whether Jon joins Daenerys and rules at her side, goes into exile, or kills her and claims the throne for himself. We are left with only the dark, lingering premonition that something is not right, that deep down Jon believes what Dany did was wrong and is silently grappling with the ultimate choice between love and duty. But it's paradoxical. Jon believes Dany is an unfit ruler. However, if he usurps her, that would make him a kinslayer and a despotic ruler in his own right. There is no right answer. And here's the thing. My film professor once told me that ambiguous endings are for cowards, and usually I think he's right. But the thing about this ending is, it's not ambiguous. Daenerys won. She is the ruler of Westeros. We just know that it might not last. For all we know, Jon isn't going to off her straight away, because that would be really stupid, given that there's a huge dragon and an army of Dothraki and Unsullied who would avenge her and burn the Seven Kingdoms to the ground, presumably. But if he does eventually snap and kill her, the Game of Thrones would most likely begin anew, just as violent and merciless as it was the first time. Because that's the thing about power, it's never stable. No matter how many people you kill to get it, there's always going to be that sword of Damocles dangling over your head. That one disgruntled relative who thinks that they have a better claim and they could do a better job than you. Jon and Dany are the last 2 Targaryens, the last chance of furthering a dynasty, but they'll also always be the biggest threats to one another. The result of this could be an unbreakable stalemate where both want the other gone but need them as a source of legitimacy, a song of ice and fire, if you will. Combined, they have one dragon and one throne. Maybe Daenerys achieves the peace that she sought to create, but it's built on this shaky foundation, this unstable alliance between two incompatible chosen ones. As George R. R. Martin said, paraphrasing William Faulkner, the only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself. Maybe, as they stare across the throne room at each other, both are contemplating killing the other, but the question is who will act first, or if either of them will act at all. This also parallels the beginning of the series in a way, with Cersei's plan to kill Robert, only now Jon and the Starks have replaced the Lannisters as the ones secretly plotting to undermine their monarch. The scheming and betrayal continues, the wheel keeps turning, with the old bad guys dead and the old good guys no longer looking so pearly white. It's an overtly downer ending, but one that fits neatly with the themes of the series as opposed to, it's the best story. So yeah, I'm aware that the irony of my solution is to make the final season even shorter than it already was. But hey, less of a bad thing is better, right? So let me just go over why I think this ending is such an improvement over what we got. Mainly, Bran. Fucking Bran, really? Like, I have never met anyone who defends this choice. Making the omnipotent, emotionless weirdo with no previous political aspirations king, and the fact that all these people just go along with it after we did an entire Game of Thrones over this? Was he mind controlling all of them? If this is the ending that George R. R. Martin is planning to go with in the books, then I can only assume that it's meant to be some kind of huge downer, like Paul Atreides ruling Arrakis at the end of Dune. Spoilers, by the way, for Dune. Like, this guy is omnipotent, and therefore rules with a complete and terrifying lack of empathy, like some kind of eldritch god pulling the strings. But that's not the show. In the show, he's just like, chill now, I guess. And Tyrion is hand, again. I know that in my ending, Tyrion's still locked up awaiting execution, and we don't find out what happens to him, but like, I think that's better. I mean, I love Tyrion, one of my favorite characters, but honestly, I would rather him have to face up to the repercussions of his choices as opposed to just getting off scot-free. He's a man whose actions led to the downfall of his own family and who accidentally empowered someone even more dangerous to take over. He doesn't need a happy ending. Incidentally, he still gets the final line of dialogue in the show, only instead of this,
I once brought a jackass and a honeycomb into a brothel.
it's this.
Why do you think Sansa told me the truth about you? Because she doesn't want Dany to be queen.
She doesn't get to choose.
No. But you do. And you have to choose now.
And you know, I think that's cooler. This show isn't a fucking comedy, or at least it wasn't supposed to be. And okay, maybe there are a few other characters whose stories are left, like, a little bit unresolved, but you can imagine, right? Maybe Arya leaves Westeros, or maybe she stays and makes killing Dany her new priority. Maybe Sansa rebels against Daenerys, or maybe she stays under her thumb but is still in charge of the North. Side note, I think Sansa's arc works a lot better if you just, like, acknowledge that she's basically become a villain. I mean, I'm no Sansa hater, genuinely, but at the end of the show, I mean, she literally is Cersei Lannister, down to the torturing her enemies for fun, always putting her own family first, and arbitrarily mistrusting other women in power. She fully became the thing that she hated, and I love her for that, but like, anyway, my point is, it's better to leave these characters' fates unknown than just haphazardly wrapping everything up with a stupid where are they now montage just to tie up loose ends. That's like ending a story with an ellipses instead of a period. It's so lame. I don't know how George R. R. Martin plans to end the books, but it won't be with a fucking montage. This ending also keeps things rooted in Daenerys' point of view, letting her end the series in a state of tragic, somewhat naive grandeur instead of, as Lindsay Ellis would say, dying like a dog. After all, even if the cost was high, she did win. Emilia Clarke said she stands by Daenerys, and you know what? So do I. So what if she did a few crimes against humanity? These things happen. Maybe she was just getting it out of her system. Maybe Jon and Tyrion are the real villains. Okay, but does this ending change fix all of the problems with the later seasons of Game of Thrones? No. No, definitely not. But I do think it makes a rewatch a little bit more palatable because you can at least imagine that despite the overall series having a slight dip in quality, it still managed to stick the landing and end on a high note, or at least a suitably depressing one. I should also acknowledge that if this was the ending we initially got, fans probably would have rioted. I mean, historically, people do not like unanswered questions in their prestige television finales, and there probably would have been petitions and or theories of a ninth season. Still, in retrospect, for all the reasons I've just discussed, I think this ending is just all around classier and unsatisfying in a sort of more satisfying way. So hey, maybe on a rewatch, just skip the last 45 minutes of the last episode. You might like it better. I know I do.